Welcome back. Okay, today we're doing something a little different. We're stepping away from those bright, cheerful lights of childhood nostalgia and venturing into, well, the dimly lit, mystical, and honestly kind of dark workshop of an ancient alchemist. Just imagine a space where a human soul is literally being carved out of a rough block of wood. That's the real setting for today's explainer.
So I want you to ask yourself this. Is Pinocchio really just a simple kid's tale about a puppet who wants to be a real boy? Or could it actually be a secret blueprint for spiritual enlightenment? Let's dive right into this, because Carlo Collodi's classic from 1883 is way, way more than a bedtime story. It's a profound, esoteric map of human psychological development and essentially a metaphorical guide to our very own awakening. And this concept absolutely hits the nail on the head for our core theme today. Back in the ancient alchemical tradition, the ultimate goal was the magnum opus, right? The great work, the transmutation from base lead into pure gold. In this story, we see the exact same process, just framed as the transmutation from a wooden puppet into a human being. We're going to decode this absolute masterpiece using a really unique dual lens, Freudian psychoanalysis on one side and esoteric spiritual alchemy on the other.
Section 1. The Secret of Pinocchio. What's literally mind-blowing here is how perfectly these two completely different frameworks just align. On the psychological side, we've got Sigmund Freud's structural model of the psyche, the id, ego, and superego. And then on the esoteric side, we have the ancient stages of alchemical transmutation and spiritual initiation. As we follow Pinocchio's journey, watch how Freud's model overlays flawlessly onto these hidden alchemical stages. It's like a giant puzzle coming together. Section 2. The id and prima materia. Okay, so in Freudian terms, Pinocchio starts off his life totally ruled by the id. The id is basically that primitive, raw part of the personality. It's just a bundle of infantile drives seeking instant pleasure with absolutely zero regard for the consequences. None. When Pinocchio is first carved, he's a tabula rasa, a total blank slate with an underdeveloped soul acting purely on impulse. So here's the crucial part. How does this map over to alchemy? Well, that psychological id perfectly mirrors the alchemical prima materia. That's the rough, unconscious wood, the starting material you absolutely need for the great work. And the woodcarver, Geppetto, in esoteric philosophy, he represents the Gnostic demiurge, the lesser god or artisan of the physical world, who crafts this imperfect being that's now completely subject to the pitfalls of material life. But, you see, Geppetto's creation is missing something. It needs a divine spark. Enter the blue fairy. In Gnostic terms, she represents nous, or the universal mind. She descends to infuse this demiurgic fabrication with life and free will. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. Though he can move and talk, he isn't a real boy yet. In ancient mystery schools, true existence only begins after spiritual illumination. Just listen to Pinocchio's own dialogue to see the id in full, untamed control. I don't want to go to school. I want to play all day. He literally actively avoids his school book. In alchemy, that school book represents the alchemist's working alphabet. But Pinocchio just tosses it aside because his id is screaming for instant gratification and dodging any real responsibility. Section 3. The ego's alchemical trials. Now, through a whole series of pretty painful mistakes, Pinocchio's ego finally starts to emerge. The ego acts as the psychological mediator. It's trying to balance those wild, primitive desires of the id with the moral values of the superego, all while calculating the realistic risks. And man, Pinocchio has to navigate some intense external temptations. These are brilliantly personified by the fox and the cat, who represent those tricky forces constantly trying to lead him astray from a straightforward path. And let's look at how this builds in our alchemical model. This ego development, it's perfectly mirrored by the Hermetic principle of solve et cogula. This is a continuous purification process where what is gross must be made subtle. Pinocchio literally goes through trials by fire, like getting his wooden feet burned, and trials by water and earth. It's slowly cleansing his nature and forcing his ego to actually calculate the consequences of his actions. We can clearly see this rational, ego-driven decision-making kicking in when he realizes, if I keep lying, my nose will get longer. I have to stop lying.
Psychoanalytically, that famous growing nose is absolutely fascinating. It serves as a physical metonym. It's a phobic symptom of his internalized guilt, a physical manifestation of his mind trying to manage his desires. His ego finally clicks and realizes, okay, if I do X, Y happens. I absolutely have to change.
Section 4. Initiation in the Whale. This moment brilliantly illustrates the story's deep mythological roots. I mean, when Pinocchio dives into the ocean and gets swallowed by the giant shark, which is usually referred to as a whale, he's directly mirroring the biblical initiation of Jonah. It is the absolute classic descent into the belly of the beast. So, what does this all mean? The whale's belly represents the dark dimension of the unconscious. It's this oniric, dreamlike womb, but at the exact same time, it's a tomb for the ignorant life he lived before. Inside this pitch-black space, Pinocchio has to conquer his deepest fears, completely abandon his old, obsolete way of being, and symbolically change places with his father. He has to step up as the rescuer rather than the rescued.
Section 5. Superego and Spiritual Gold.
Coming out of that whale, Pinocchio is a profoundly changed puppet. The superego has finally taken dominance. The superego is the internalization of moral and ethical values. It's been shaped throughout the entire story by Geppetto's unconditional support and the Blue Fairy's strict spiritual discipline. It's what drives him towards social responsibility and ultimately true self-sacrifice. Looking through our dual lens again, this matured superego is literally the alchemical philosopher's gold. He's transformed from a rough piece of wood into a smooth stone. The magnum opus, the great work of self-transformation, is finally reaching its completion. And his own words are the ultimate proof of that shift. I can't let Geppetto get trapped. I have to save him, even if it's dangerous. Pinocchio is willingly sacrificing his own safety for someone else. This totally selfless act of bravery proves the superego's dominance over the id, and it earns Pinocchio his ultimate reward, his final, literal transmutation from a wooden marionette into a true, living human being. Section 6. The Universal Awakening. Okay, let's pull this all together and summarize the incredible developmental arc we've just explored. Step 1. The unconscious wood, completely driven by the id, representing the prima materia. Step 2. The mediating puppet, developing an ego through the trials of purification, or solvet coagula. And finally, Step 3. The real human, guided by the superego, representing spiritual illumination and the philosopher's gold. It is a completely perfect map, going right from pure instinct all the way to enlightenment. Now I want to show you one final metaphysical secret that's been hiding in plain sight this whole time: his actual name. In Tuscan dialect, pin refers to a pine cone or pine nut, which directly symbolizes the pineal gland. Occhio literally means eye. Put them together, the awakened third eye. The entire story is a brilliant allegory for opening our spiritual vision and awakening from our inculturated beliefs, the malware that makes us act like manipulated puppets in our own lives. Which brings us to the ultimate question you really should take away from this explainer today. Are you still letting your inner puppet be controlled by unseen strings of impulse and societal conditioning? Or are you ready to undertake the great work, integrate your id, ego, and superego, and become the fully awakened creator of your own reality? The blueprint is right there, hiding in a children's tale. The rest, well, that's entirely up to you. Until next time, keep learning and keep awakening.